Welcome back to the Itsy Bitsy Build YouTube channel. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make miniature screens or room dividers in 4 different styles. Screens with mirrors and tiny hinges that you can bend, ones with fabric and intricate designs, and a rustic 4-panel screen perfect for a farmhouse. I used the Cricut Maker to complete these items. Use the chapters on this video to skip ahead to your favourite design. We're starting with this Black and Hessian 3-panel screen. I took inspiration from this screen that I saw online. Open Cricut Design Space. I'm using the iPad version here. Under the Shapes tab, click the circle. Lock the aspect ratio of your circle before resizing. Then create a square. Move your square over and resize it so that it covers half of your circle. Once in place, highlight both the square and the circle. Go over to the Actions tab and click Slice. The slice function will cut your circle into 2. Delete all pieces except one half circle, then click Duplicate. This will create a second half circle with the same dimensions. Then in the top right hand corner, hold down the Rotate button to rotate the circle, then drag it down like so. Click on the Shapes tab and create a square. Drag it over and remember to unlock the aspect ratio before resizing it. Ensure all of your shapes are touching, then highlight all 3, go over to the Actions tab and click Weld. The Weld function combines all 3 shapes together. After this, duplicate your shape twice to create 3. 1 will be used for the Hessian and 2 will be used for the frame. And with the aspect ratio unlocked, we're going to resize our second shape so it fits snugly inside the first one. Once you have an edge around the outside like so, you're going to highlight both objects and click Slice. This will cut the smaller shape out of the bigger one, leaving you with an edge piece like so. The third duplicate shape that you made earlier, we're going to cut from Hessian. So in order to place it on a separate Cricut mat, we need to recolor it under the Edit and Line Type tab. Our black shape will be cut from wood and the Hessian fabric will sit in between. To ensure the Hessian fabric doesn't come out the sides, you should resize it so that it's a little bit smaller. You can do this by placing the object at the front under the Arrange tab and then dragging it to fit. Notice it's only slightly smaller than the outside edge. You don't want it poking out the middle either. Once you're happy with the shape, you can then duplicate the black frame so we have a front and back piece. Going back to our inspiration photo, we want to create these side panels so it can stand upright. The side pieces I'm going to cut from bamboo skewer, so we don't need to create them in Cricut Design Space, but I've put them in so we can visualize the length of our other piece. So to create the bottom piece, simply go and create a square, make sure the aspect ratio is unlocked, drag it over and resize it to a rectangle that fits across your entire frame. Now we need to make 2 duplicates of our shapes because we have 3 panels on our screen. So highlight everything, head over to the Actions tab and then click Duplicate. And do that again. The last step is to miniaturize your screen, and I'm using 1/12 scale. To do this, I've googled room divided dimensions, which will give me the full size measurements of a room divider. Open the product page and then down in the description, you'll see all the dimensions you need. Using Inch Calculator, I can enter the scale that I'm working in, 1/12, and then enter the dimensions of the full size product. And then when I click Calculate, I'll get all of the dimensions in 1/12 scale. But don't worry, if you want to skip this step, I'll pop all of the dimensions for these screens in the description below. Finally, enter the scale down measurements under the Edit tab. Now we're ready to cut everything out. I'm cutting the frame from this 1mm sheet of balsa wood, and I'm sticking a piece of black shiny vinyl on one side of the wood. This will give our frame a sophisticated shine. It also helps fortify the wood so that it doesn't break. Be sure to trim off the edges. And I'm placing the wood on the purple strong grip mat. You should also use some painter's tape to hold it in place. To cut the Hessian fabric, I'm using the rotary blade that came with the Cricut Maker. Place your fabric onto the pink fabric grip mat. Again, be sure to secure it with some painter's tape. And here are our pieces cut out. We've got our Hessian fabric, and here are the frame pieces with black shiny vinyl. I've coloured the edges of the frame with a black Sharpie so that when we stick the two pieces together, you can't see the wood underneath. Here are the bamboo skewers that I mentioned earlier, and just measure them out depending on how tall you want your frame to be. Chop it off at the right point, and then you're going to use that stick as a measurement for all of the others so that they're exactly the same height. You're going to need 2 pieces for each screen area, and we have 3 screens, so you need 6 pieces in total. Then I painted them with some acrylic black paint. Set them aside to dry completely. Now we're going to attach our Hessian fabric to the frame. Using a fine tipped glue bottle, place glue around the inside edge of one frame. Then place your Hessian fabric on top to secure it to the frame. Then place a thin layer of glue around the edge on top of the Hessian fabric. On top of that, place your second frame piece with the black shiny side facing outwards. Repeat these steps to create 3 pieces of your frame. Now let's add the legs. Apply some glue with a fine tipped glue bottle, then attach the legs to either side of your frame. Make sure that your legs line up when you're sticking them on, so that you don't have a wobbly frame. The final step is to attach our 2 base pieces, so apply some glue and then stick them on, right at the bottom but leaving a little gap, and do that on the other side as well. Once all the glue has dried, you're going to glue the 3 panels together to make one screen. Our black and Hessian screen is complete. I don't know about you, but it really gives me 1920s vibes. So cute! Now for our second screen, and this one is my personal favourite. I've used a mirror material with white vinyl pattern over the top. It also has tiny hinges, so you can bend the panels. I took inspiration from these 2 screens with a lace-like pattern. Starting with the pattern first, we're going to go into Cricut Design Space under Images, and then type the word Pattern. I picked this intricate design. Create a rectangle under the Shapes tab, then create a square and drag it over to the bottom of your rectangle. This will form part of the legs. Then highlight both and click the slice tool, which will cut the square out of the rectangle. You can delete the pieces that you don't need. Create another square and resize it to match the size of our patterned tile. Then drag it over to the rectangle and place it at the top. And then you're going to duplicate that square and place it underneath like so. Place those to the side for now. Now we're going to use the patterned tile. So arrange it so that it's sitting at the front and then drag it over the top of your frame. And you want to resize it so that it's larger, but the 2 pieces can fit on the same panel. Now grab your square and again arrange it so it's sitting at the front, and we're going to use the patterned tile underneath to center up perfectly. These squares will be cut out from our frame. Drag your tile piece over and then highlight the top square and your frame and slice. And that will cut the square out of your frame. Then repeat this for the bottom section. And now when you drag the tile over, you can see it underneath. So create a copy of that tile and we're going to weld these 2 tiles together. Line them up and make sure both tiles are touching, highlight both and click Weld. So Cricut knows to place it on a separate mat, I've clicked the Edit tab and then Line Type to change the colours. Duplicate your frame so we have a piece for the front and the back. Then duplicate your frame twice to create 3 panels. In the last step, create a square and colour that square a blue colour to represent the mirror piece. And then we're going to resize it so that it fits snugly inside our frame. Duplicate your mirror twice to create 3. For the mirror section, I used these adhesive mirror wall tiles. They came with a protective blue film over the top. The material is very similar to an adhesive vinyl, so I used the fine tip blade to cut it out. I also used the premium vinyl setting in Cricut Design Space, and I cut it twice. For the pattern on top of the mirror, I used white vinyl. For the frame section, I used white presentation board with a 1mm thickness. I used the knife blade to cut it out. So here's our mirror piece, and I'm transferring over the white vinyl onto our mirror piece with some sticky tape. I actually found it was easier to weed the vinyl by sticking all of the vinyl onto the mirror and then weeding it after that. Here are our mirrored panels, and aren't they beautiful? And here we have the frame. To assemble, apply some glue to the inside edge and carefully place the mirror piece on top. Then place another thin line of glue and place the other piece on top. I bought some tiny hinges from Wish. They were perfect for this project, and all the joins are movable. I just glued them on without any screws. Be sure not to place any glue on the hinge part. And that's the mirror screen done. It's completely bendable and you can shape it however you like. Now let's make our fabric screen. I chose this really cute lemon coloured flower pattern, and I took inspiration from this dressing screen I saw online. Start with a rectangle, just like we did with the white frame. Under the Shapes tab, add a square, drag it over, and then unlock the aspect ratio. And then we're going to create a rectangle that doesn't quite touch the bottom, but is smaller than the bigger rectangle. Then go over to the Actions tab, and we're going to duplicate our rectangle. Then drag that to the bottom, but leave a gap between the 2 rectangles. Once you're happy with the placement, highlight 2 of the rectangles at the top, and then we're going to click the slice tool. And that will cut the small rectangle out of the big one. After you've done that, highlight the frame and the bottom piece and also slice it. Delete the pieces that you don't need, and we have our frame. Now we're going to make the fabric insert, so create a rectangle and resize it to match the hole in your frame. And so the Cricut knows we're cutting this from a separate material, we need to colour it purple under the Edit tab, which will place it on a separate Cricut mat. You can also recolour the frame to a brown colour to signify you're cutting it from wood. Next, duplicate your frame so we have 2 pieces, and the fabric will sit in between those 2 pieces. Then duplicate your panels. I've chosen 3 panels. Now this part is completely optional, but I've created a decorative top. So start by creating a pentagon and then resize it to the shape of one of our screens. Make sure you keep that aspect ratio locked. Once we know it fits the dimensions of our screen, we're going to drag it over and begin cutting out our pattern. So first we need to chop the top off, so create a square and drag it over to the middle so you just have the triangle. Highlight both, go over to the Actions tab and click Slice. Delete all the bits that you don't need and you should be left with this little triangle piece which fits perfectly on the top of the frame. And this next bit is up to you, but I've used lots of different shapes, resized them to make them smaller, and then using the slice tool, cut those shapes out of our pattern. Now the great thing about the iPad version of Design Space, it has this little lock-on feature, so you can make sure your shapes line up on either side for symmetry. And on the last little bit, I created this little diamond and put it right in the middle, and then cut that out of our frame. The last step is to make sure that this piece matches your wood color, so Cricut places the frame and this piece on the same mat. And you also need to duplicate it twice to make 3 pieces. You could also weld the top piece to the bottom frame to make one uniform shape, but I've kept them separate. I coloured my wood frame brown to give it a nice dark stain. Be sure to get all of the little inside edges. Then apply some glue with a fine tipped glue bottle on the inside edge. Carefully apply your chosen fabric to the inside, making sure that there are no gaps. Apply a second layer of glue across the fabric edges, and then we're going to apply our second piece on top. Then repeat that step to make 3 panels. Using the same hinges that we used on our white frame, glue those down to the back. Now remember, you don't need these hinges, you could always glue the panels together in your desired position. Here are our top pieces, and again I'm going to colour them in using a brown marker to give it a wood stain. Be sure to get in all those nooks and crannies. Glue the pieces together, then glue them to the top of your frame. And our third room divider is done, and it's got the movable hinges so you can position it however you like. Our final room divider is this rustic looking 4-panel screen, and I took inspiration from this one I saw online. Again, starting with a rectangle, go over to the Actions tab and duplicate that shape. And just like we did with the other screens, we're going to make it a bit smaller so that it creates a frame. Then highlight both and click Slice. Then using one of the rectangles we cut earlier, we're going to create a bar and lay it over the top in the middle there. Then to center it, highlight both, go over to the Edit tab and click Align. Then click Align Middle to place it right in the middle. Then I've zoomed in a little bit and I've made sure that the bar is not going over the edges. Then highlight everything, go over to the Actions tab and click Weld. This will create one uniform shape. Now we're going to make the crisscross pattern, so create a square and then turn it into a thick line that has a similar thickness. Rotate it and drag it over. Now you want to kind of get it across so it's touching the other side, but we also want it to be narrow. So you've got to kind of move it around a little bit to get exactly the right placement. Once you're happy with it, you can then highlight it and duplicate the shape. And then we want to weld this piece to the frame, so highlight both and click Weld. Then with the duplicate piece you made earlier, we're going to click the horizontal button, which will flip the shape. Then drag it over to the top and highlight both your frame and the piece, and go to the Actions tab and click Weld. And our frame is effectively done, so we're going to have 2 pieces of wood on top of each other, one with the cutouts and one as a single panel. I've then coloured my pieces brown so that I know these need to be cut from wood, and duplicate all of my shapes 3 times for 4 panels. To get the rustic look, I've painted all of these pieces in black acrylic paint first. Once dried, I then went over it with some white paint. I then glued the top frame to the bottom frame. And I applied some crackle glue to the top to give it an even more rustic look. And this is what the panels look like when they're finished. And just like the previous two screens, I applied the little hinges. And our panel is complete. And you can see the hinges mean you can bend all of those screen areas. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, guys. Thank you so much for supporting my channel.